Okay, Professor Olivetti here with a short video on how to use the biblical commentaries for your paper. So I'm going to start out here with the most challenging one, the Jerome Biblical Commentary. And if you take this out of the library or look at it in the library, more likely, you could go to the table of contents. Now, in the table of contents, you have a bunch of stuff on the Old Testament, and then you'll get to volume 2 on the New Testament. If you see here on page 13, Roman numerals, that's the introductory stuff, page 13. The first thing you should read is the synoptic problem. That's page 40. That's just 6 pages there. And that's going to really help you understand a little bit about how the Gospel of Luke might be different from the other Gospels and why. If we're actually looking at Luke here, we see the contents are going to be on page 115, 106 to 164, or section 44, chapter 44 of the book. But remember, this is volume 2. So this won't be page 115, the beginning of the book. This will be way back, actually in the back of the book, since the Old Testament is so much longer than the New Testament. So if we find those pages, volume 2 in the back of the book, we can start with 44, the Gospel according to Luke. And there's a lot of introductory information there. There's just a general section here on the Gospel itself. And a page, that goes on page 115, 116, right? 117. And you'll see up here in the left-hand corner, that's just the chapter and subheading or subchapter, I guess you could say, of the commentary. That's not really very helpful. You're going to have a lot more luck following through in the actual subchapters, as I'll show you. So here we go, the Gospel according to Luke, and we have another page of introduction there. I advise that you read all of this because it's really going to help you understand a little bit more about the world in which the Gospel of Luke was written and the people who wrote it, and that's really going to help you with the first part of your paper. So on we go, 118. And finally here, on page 119, we get to the actual commentary. This is where they're actually going to write about what it says in the actual book of Luke, pretty much verse for verse. So you see he starts off there with a prologue, and that's just chapter 1, verse 1 to 4. Now these little bold-faced titles with the chapter and the verse. So that says there 1:1-4. That means chapter 1, verses 1 to 4, or 1, 2, 3, and 4. So there's a little writing there about the prologue telling you about it. And then there's a little summary here on subchapter 21 that says the infancy narratives, chapters 1, verse 5 to chapters 2, verse 52. So what's going on here then is kind of a summary or an introduction to that whole group of passages known as the infancy narratives. If we go on to the next page, we'll see that continue. And then the next page, then you'll finally get into one of the actual text, one of the sub-settings of the infancy narrative. So this one, we start up here. We trace it down to here, the infancy narratives in general. They're going to talk about all the infancy narratives. And then they're going to talk about a particular section within the infancy narrative. So this is important just to look and see. And the best way to, again, find the passages you're looking for is to look for these subheadings here with the chapter and verse. So I think I'll give you an example. If we skip a couple pages, we actually get to one that we focused on. And you can see it here if you decide to do the temptation of Christ in the desert. You'll see chapter 4, verse 1 to 13. So there you go. This section here giving you a very nice description of what it is they're talking about in that passage. Again, a lot of stuff going to be in there that you probably won't pick up on because you live currently in the United States in the 21st century, where this stuff was written in the first century in the Near East. So this is going to be very different. The things that they're intending with their words might not be the things that you're picking up on. So that's the advantage of these scholars, that they spend their life trying to figure this stuff out. And so we can have a better understanding of what the inspired human author was actually saying, right, in their inspiration. So this is the toughest one. This is the Jerome Biblical Commentary. But we also have the New Jerome Biblical Commentary, which is a great source too. Now this one, the Collegeville Biblical Commentary, is a great source. It's a little bit simpler. It's not going to be as detailed, though. You're really not going to get as much for your paper out of this. It's rather kind of general. They don't go into all specific phrases and specifically what words meant in the context the way that the Jerome, or I believe the New Jerome, does. Same thing with the New Collegeville. It's a different kind of read. It gives you a very simple summary, but doesn't necessarily give you the detail that the Jerome or New Jerome does. Anyways, moving right along. Also a little bit easier to find your text in here. So you just go to the table of contents, and there it is, Luke 9:36. No volume 1, volume 2 distinction, so it's a little easier. And then you have a nice introduction to Luke, including some stuff about the themes, starting on page 936. So again, it's a nice read. It's going to give you some understanding of your context. And then finally here on page 939, they're going to go right into the text, and they just list it straight out. They don't do like a general section and then start analyzing the stories within that section. They'll go pretty much in order. So if they have a section on Luke 1-4, there it is. And then when that's done, they pick right up with 5, and they go through to, oh, sorry, take it back. They don't quite go through. They also do an introduction, a general introduction of the infancy narratives, right? So chapter 1, verse 5 to chapter 2, verse 52. Those are all the infancy stories. But guess what? Those infancy stories break down into a shorter group of stories. And so, after a general introduction, we also have an analysis here of chapter 1, verse 5 to chapter 1, verse 25, and then pick it up with chapter 1, verse 26. And so it is a little bit easier to follow, but again, watch out for some of those tricks. Like, sorry, it's not a trick. Watch out for some of these things that are sometimes confusing, like having a section on a larger group of stories, and then within that, having those stories broken down again. You know, you might say, oh, okay, so if I dropped off at chapter 5, verse 52, I should be picking up chapter 3, verse 1 or whatever. But guess what? No, not in this case, because that was just a general introduction. And so now he's going to pick it up with specifically about the announcement of John's birth in chapter 1, verse 5 to 25. But all that being said, you can kind of follow along. Again, just look for the subheadings till you find your section. And don't skip these pre-sections, Don't skip these introductions. They're going to help you out a lot, to give you the content you need to make a good, well-written paper. Okay, again, any questions, anytime, call me. I know this stuff is tricky sometimes, but all these sources that are on the list for the papers are in the library.